You are in the ladies' room with Dr. Donica, the only public ladies' room you can enter anytime without ever waiting online. I'm your host, Dr. Donica Moore. We'll be having real conversations with real women about really intimate issues. They may be embarrassing, sad, or funny, but they will always be interesting and informative. You know, like the best conversations you've had in ladies' rooms with your best friends, or total strangers and a physician. Please join us. I am so excited for our next guest, who I have called the Irma Bombeck of my generation. And if you don't know who Irma Bombeck is, please Google it after this segment. Sally Higginson is a Chicago Tribune columnist, providing her spin on everything from carpools to incontinence and everything in between. She's also currently writing her first book, a collection of essays that her writing group promises will coalesce into a memoir. I jumped on the chance to offer to write a jacket comment just so I could be one of the first to get to read an advanced copy. After graduating from Dartmouth College, Sally worked as the photo editor at Women's Day and Outside magazines, then earned a master's in education from Northwestern University. She has been a high school English teacher and then a tutor, thrilled to let someone else do the writing. Sally is best known, perhaps, as the co-host of the popular nationally syndicated radio show called Walking on Air with Betsy and Sal from 2006 to 2011. This was a lifestyle radio program with a sense of heart and a sense of humor. The co-hosts were sisters who chatted about everything, which proved slightly mortifying to their mother and entirely mortifying to their respective children. I had the pleasure to mortify my children by being a frequent guest in a segment they called Weekly Checkup with Dr. Donica. And I have to say that was kind of a model in the back of my mind for what we wanted to accomplish with this podcast. So anyway, now it's payback time. I did Sally's show, so she couldn't turn down the generous invitation to do mine. And with her trademark sense of humor, when I asked her what topic she wanted to discuss, she unfortunately passed over incontinence and immediately went right for a much juicier subject: losing your virginity after divorce. Which is her title, not mine. Welcome to the ladies' room, Sally.
Well, thank you, Dr. Donica, who I'm going to call Donica.
Thank you, because that happens to be my name.
It does. I want to say retroactively, thank you for being on our dead show. It's gone. It lives in cyberspace, but you were one of the joys of being on the radio, being able to talk to you. So I'm thrilled that we can continue our chat.
Well, thank you. And here's your opportunity to ask me all those questions that you saved up since 2011.
Oh, good Lord. That suggests I remember them. But before I take full credit for the fantastic title of Losing Your Virginity After Divorce, let me just give credit only this one time to my sister. It's my sister, Betsy, who was my co-host, who is your friend, and who is one of the rare people I know who is not just married, but happily married.
Yeah, I can't even believe it.
Yeah, well, you know what? There's an exception to prove every rule. But the thing
your parents too.
That's true, but they're crazily married.
Yeah.
I mean, you pick your adverb, but here's the thing: adjective, adverb. Here's what I want to tell you. After I got divorced 4.5 years ago, I was very much afraid to date, and it was my sister who said, "It is time to lose your virginity," and I knew exactly what she meant. And wow, was I afraid. I don't think I was that afraid the first time I lost my virginity.
So what were you afraid of?
Well, let's go back a little bit, because I need to say that I was married for 23.5 years. Mm-hmm. And it was a monogamous relationship. We were dating monogamously for another 2 years before we got married. So call it 25 years, a quarter of a century of kissing one person, seeing one person naked, having that one person see me naked.
With the lights off.
With the lights on. With the lights on. And what I'll say is, you know, every marriage that falls apart ends for different reasons. But in my marriage, it wasn't for lack of attraction, and it wasn't for infidelity. So really, when we got divorced, and I said to my mother, 5 words: it's sad, but it's amicable. Okay. There's a lot more detail.
I still can't say those words.
No, and there'll be a book coming out. But here's the thing. When I got divorced, I remember, and I asked for the divorce, I remember thinking, I'm not divorcing this man because somebody else out there looks better. Mm-hmm. I'm not divorcing this man because I'm attracted to some real person out there. I mean, we can all dream about Liam Neeson, but no, there was no real object of my desire. And I certainly think I might have stayed married a little bit longer because I was attracted to my husband and comfortable in that area. So the thought of starting out and dating and being sexual with not just new people, but middle-aged men or
men who are older.
Well, exactly. And I'm 55. I was 50 when I got divorced. So, and people who hadn't, who might assume because I have 2 children, I've been pregnant twice, but now they could see my scars from my hysterectomy. Now they could see a few of my stretch marks. There were just all these things that I think I remember when I was single being self-conscious a little bit about my body, but I was young and the things I was worried about, honestly, it just didn't matter. And then going back out there, it just seemed very frightening. And my sister was right. I just had to get out there.
Right.
Now,
it's like doing anything. It's like riding a bicycle in a way. Pejorative.
Well, that's what they say. Let me just tell you. The bicycle equipment varies on the guys out there.
Real bicycles vary too. Some
true.
bicycles have flat tires or tires that are not so pumped up.
Right,
Some bicycles have a bar across, whereas some bicycles are much more comfortable to sit on. Some have those long skinny seats, whereas some have those really comfortable wide seats.
Well, right. So we're not going to go into size matters. Let's just start with my sister standing over me saying, you need to get online.
Okay.
Which is a separate topic. So let's
and in fairness, I said that to you too.
Yes, you did. Yes, you did.
I feel like I was your divorce mentor in a way, because I was like a year ahead of you at every
Can I just say, it's actually been very helpful to have divorce mentors.
Mm-hmm.
That's been really, forget the birth doula. A divorce doula. Helping you through. But here's what you can't do, and here's what Betsy couldn't do. On my first date, at the end of a perfectly fine first date, when we'll call him Morton, because we went to Morton's. I have names for all these guys. So
I used to have code names also, but they were much more elegant than that. They were like the guy who I told you about who told terrible jokes, or the guy who I told you about who was, on his 3rd marriage.
Okay, well, this was Morton. We're going to call him Morton.
Morton.
When he leaned in to give me a kiss, and he did give me a kiss at the end of the evening, I jumped back in horror. And and it wasn't, and I had to apologize. I found myself so embarrassed for jumping back and recoiling. And the reason was, and I said to him, this has nothing to do with you or your kiss. Mm-hmm. He wasn't so cute, but the kiss was fine. But as he was leaning in and as his lips were touching mine, I realized I hadn't kissed someone who wasn't my husband for 25 years. And I forgot to mentally prepare for that. And I certainly forgot to be drunk for that.
So did you feel that you were still married and being unfaithful?
No.
Or did you just think you weren't drunk enough, or that you just weren't ready? Or he wasn't cute enough?
Well, what I'll say is it's a little bit like this. It's a little bit like when you've been wearing a bunch of Birkenstocks. They're comfortable and they fit, and you go and you put on a high heel. It's not fine. It's just, it doesn't feel right. Mm-hmm. Okay. And this was just the kiss. Forget going to the virginity area. Mm-hmm. And I realized the problem was mine, because I can wear different shoes. And if you can wear different shoes.
Yeah, but some shoes you really can't wear.
Okay, but let's get to this.
Since we're doing metaphor day, some shoes you really can't wear because they're really hideous. Some shoes you can't wear because they really are 35 years out of style. Some shoes you can't wear because they have holes in them. And some shoes you can't wear because they're just too uncomfortable.
But it's fun to go shoe shopping, and it's fun to try them on, even if you can't walk more than 3 feet in them.
And it's always fun to look.
And that's what dating, well, it's not as much fun to look when you're dating at the 55 plus site, but I had to try on, I literally had to try on different men. And by the way, in the 4.5 years since my divorce, I have found long-term relationships. I don't even know what a long-term relationship is but a year and a half.
Let's call it a long-term relationship is a year or more.
So I've had one of those. Okay. And I've had a 6 month, and I've had a 6 month, and I've had a year and a half.
Okay.
So enough time to know that I can find something out there, a pair of shoes out there that feels comfortable. Mm-hmm. But let's go back to the topic at hand and how to lose your virginity after divorce. So you're scared. you're self-conscious. Speak for myself. I was scared. I was self-conscious about my body, certainly about my performance, unused to somebody else who didn't know my body, who didn't know what I liked. And so that first kiss was embarrassing. But luckily, I got through it. I apologized. I persevered. He and I went out a few more times, and I decided, and this is bad. Let's pretend my name isn't me, and let's pretend I'm somebody else. Just so that I can deny that I say this.
What name do you want to be?
Oh, I'll be Betsy. I'll be my sister. No brainer. But here's the thing.
Look-alike.
I decided that in some ways, somebody who wasn't going to be my ideal guy was the perfect one to experiment or to use as my guinea pig or to, and I don't want to say that I used him because this is consensual. This is, mutual, lonely adult people making.
And I'm sure he had his needs as well.
Right. I like to think he was dating up, but I'm not sure he thought he was dating up. But here's the thing.
We have to look up and see what podcast he's on right now.
Oh, there is no podcast for this man. They're not. But you know what? Not a bad man. Not a bad man. But think about if Walter Matthau and Harold Ramis had a love child.
Ooh.
He was.
And that's who you decided to experiment with.
Well,
okay.
You know what?
You're a better woman than I am.
Well, I have 2 rules: dark and drunk. These are very good. Okay, anybody listening, write that down in your head. Dark and drunk. Because here's the thing. When I mean drunk, I don't mean non-consensual. I've been listening to your show. So make sure you're in a safe place.
You're not sloppy drunk.
You're not
still
sloppy
making the
drunk.
decisions.
Absolutely, it's consensual. However, stone cold sober, I do not recommend.
Well, we had a guest on our Me Too episode, Olympic champion Nancy Hogshead, who admitted live on this podcast that if it weren't for alcohol, she wouldn't have 90% of the sex that she has in her marriage.
Well, the truth is I listened to that. I loved it. It was a great interview. And it resonated because I don't know anybody. Well, I mean, I know a few people who don't drink at all, but of the adults who do drink and drink socially, date night is just that. You go out, you get a little bit of tipsy, whatever it is. It just helps you forget the work deadlines. It helps you forget the carpools or the laundry or the stretch marks. That's all. And
all I have to say as a doctor to all our listeners, especially those who are driving, is that if you're drunk enough that you forget you have stretch marks, do not drive. Yeah.
So I'm not talking about, and by the way, let's not even go to the space of safe sex in terms of now I'm an adult in the dating world and there needs to be condoms. So I'm not even talking about that.
We are going to have to get to that in this segment.
Well, we'll get to it.
That's just responsible for this topic because that's a huge issue for women who are dating after divorce and especially women over 50. And I do have a mental list of questions that women have already submitted to me for this segment.
Oh, do you? Okay, because I will.
They're all in the safe sex arena, but we have to go through them because I'm staggered that women over 50 would not know the answers to these questions. But I'm proud of them for asking them and calling them to my attention.
I cannot wait to hear the questions. I do have my own confession in this area, but let me get through let me get through a few things.
And then we'll hear your confession first.
Exactly. So here's what I want to say. I found it very helpful to know this was my guy. I found it very helpful to be pushed to beyond my comfort level with my sister saying, it's time. You just got to get through it. And I found it helpful to have it be 2 drinks for me. 2 drinks for me is tipsy. It's, not just tipsy, but okay, I'm going to get naked. And the other thing is dark was very helpful because some people call it romantic. I call it forgiving. But here's what I found unbelievably illuminating. I found, and I've done now a little more research.
Okay.
As self-conscious as I was, it's nothing compared to the middle-aged men. And when I say middle-aged, I'm talking 55 plus. So what, should we just call them old? We'll just call them old.
No, because I will tell you my medical definition of middle-aged. Middle-aged is 10 years older than I happen to be at that time.
Well, doctor.
Since you and I are the same age, we are probably dating middle-aged men. If they're more than 10 years older than we are, then they're in advanced middle age.
You are my favorite doctor for so many reasons. Here's what I've discovered about these middle-aged men. They are so self-conscious about their bellies. It is, they are unaware of their sagging bottoms. They are clueless about their multiple chins. They don't seem bothered at all about their toenail hygiene. But they are very self-confident. To a person, I have been with men who have patted their stomach and say, this isn't what I normally am. And I'm thinking to myself, right. And I've weighed what it says on my driver's license. Never.
Well, one of the leakers, one of the famous leakers from President Trump's staff, who's on Twitter as Rogue White House Senior Advisor, and of course I follow him, he tweeted out yesterday that President Trump was trying to get the doctor to change his weight.
Well, yeah.
On the medical report, and he said he wanted it to be 199 pounds.
Okay.
Apparently, one of the other staffers said, well, could we make it something a little more realistic? I finally have something in common with the president.
Right. Well, what's unusual there is he's normally likes to inflate things. So
right.
He likes to deflate that.
So he's very self-conscious about that. But the number one thing I found that men lied about on their Match.com profiles when I was doing this was their height.
Oh,
and they lied a huge amount about the height, as if, did you not think I wasn't going to notice?
Donica, as a 5'10" Jewish woman, I am so disheartened by that particular lie. First of all, you go on JDate. Anybody who says he's 5'10", nobody even does. But if you said you were 5'10", you're definitely 5'8".
Well,
if
with
you
all
say you're 5'8", you're 5'5", and Match.com about the same.
With all respect to all my people, my friends and I in this area, and we're in the New York, New Jersey area, we call that a Jewish 5'10".
I understand.
And a Jewish 5'10" is.
But
really
you know, what I didn't understand was, I was supposed to lie about my profile. Again,
you are not supposed to lie, because if your goal is to find a relationship, what a stupid way to enter into a relationship. The number two thing I found that men lied about, which staggered me, including when I saw my own ex-husband's profile on Match, was their age.
Yeah.
Like, why would you do that? And then they all put this lame statement in there. I'm just changed my age for search purposes. Did you think that you were going to meet a 27-year-old who was going to be so enamored by how fabulous you were that they were going to forget the fact that you took 5 to 10 years off your age?
Well, let me just say this to the 27-year-olds who might find themselves with these middle-aged men.
Don't do it.
Well, they'll have bellies, and that's okay. That's okay. You don't want it to be a dick-do belly. That's David Sedaris's line.
I have never heard that before, but I'm going to write that down.
Well, here, let me just tell you what it is. And again, I'm giving credit to David Sedaris.
I love how you give credit to all your sources, because you're a journalist.
Well,
you have a degree in journalism.
And I really hope that somebody gives me credit when they cite me. But a dick-do is
you do need to trademark the losing your virginity after divorce.
I think at this point,
that's the title of your book.
It could be.
I'm going to become your agent.
I want you to be my agent. But here's the thing. A dick-do, and again, it's David Sedaris's term, is a man whose stomach sticks out further than his dick-do. Okay.
Well, when you were talking about the cesarean section scars beforehand, I was going to say one of the nice advantages of having a nice little menopot, and I took that term from somebody else who I don't remember who came up with it, but I didn't create that word, the menopot, otherwise known as muffin top. The positive thing about that, and as you know, I could come up with a positive thing for just about everything, but if you have that, you can't see your C-section scars. Unless you had an up and down C-section.
Let me just say
very
this.
Rare.
That's why it's dark and drunk. Because you can't see it. Now, here's a couple other pluses about dating, because we got to get back to the topic. Couple other.
When did I ever stick on the topic?
Not ever. And when will I ever? Okay, but here's the thing. Dark and drunk is good. Also, I find that it's actually very reassuring that most middle-aged men don't have perfect eyesight.
Exactly.
So they take off their glasses, that you're immediately in blurred vision. That's very reassuring.
Well, the other advantage, let me point this out to you. The disadvantage of sleeping with the same man for 25 years, and I did that too, is that they remember what you looked like when you were 25. They remember what you looked like before you had kids.
Right.
They remember what you looked like when you were much, much younger. These guys are probably comparing you to the woman they were married to for 25 years. So they don't know what you looked like when you were 25. So think of it that way.
Well, that's interesting. I hadn't thought of that. But what I will tell you is I bike. I do a lot of road biking, and I happen to bike with a bunch of middle-aged men.
Mm-hmm.
They're all happily married. They are all happily married. But they were very sad when I just announced that I was divorcing.
Mm-hmm.
They liked my husband. As sad but amicable. It's my story. But
you know that every one of my listeners is like screaming at me to ask you why you got divorced if it was so amicable. But we'll get back to that.
Different story. Okay. And by the way, there'll be a memoir.
I have to listen to my listeners.
Yeah. Okay.
They're screaming at me.
They're okay. Well, can I please just finish losing the virginity story?
Yes.
Okay. Where was I? So my bike boys. I called them my bike boys, and I said to them, because we stop and have coffee for half of the morning of our ride, and I said, I'm really nervous about dating. And all of them said, in different ways, but they all had two of the same messages. Message number one: before you date a guy, please date a woman and then come talk to us about it. I don't know
what?
I do not know what this universal fantasy is among men that they want to hear details of women sleeping with women. It was a recurring theme in Friends. It was, I mean, it's just a thing that I don't understand.
And I have actually asked men that question. Like, what is it? Any fantasies about seeing men sleeping together?
Right.
Not that there's anything wrong with it, but I don't want to watch them the same way I don't want to watch other people enjoying a fine meal at a nice restaurant.
Right. So what do your friends say?
So he couldn't really answer. He says, I don't know. There's just something.
Yeah.
He said, I don't know. I'm a guy. It's a guy thing.
It's a guy thing. So that was the first thing they said to me. And I was like, okay, well, that's not helpful. But the second thing they said, I said, I'm really self-conscious about getting naked in front of somebody. These are guys I've biked with for 15 years. And by the way,
who see you in spandex all the time.
I was just going to say, there is no less flattering clothing than bike clothing. There really isn't. And I'm in front of these guys in my spandex all the time. And they said to me, Sally, we are speaking a universal truth when we say men our age, and again, 55 to 65, a little older even. They said, we're so blissfully appreciative that any woman would be willing to get naked near us. We don't care what she looks like. And by the way, you're beautiful. But I remember thinking, oh my gosh, this might not be about my insecurity. This might be about the other guy's insecurity. This might be about just a universal acceptance. Like you said, here's where we are. This is our age. So I still say dark and drunk at the beginning, but hearing the words of those bike boys saying, you know what, we're just so happy somebody's willing to get in bed with us. And these are guys that are happily married. So to the women out there.
The thing I kept thinking about all the famous couples who got divorced or separated the same year I did.
Oh,
and one of the couples that got separated, and I was very comforted that there were all these fabulous women who just were not able to make it work with their fabulous men. So I was in good company. And one of the couples was Elizabeth Hurley and Hugh Grant. And I always had a little crush on Hugh Grant until the whole thing where it wound up with the skanky hoe on the side of the road.
Yeah, there's that.
And he got interviewed on one of the late night talk shows, and the host said to him, what were you thinking? And he said, well, clearly I wasn't thinking. So I figured if Hugh Grant could have sex with that woman on the side of the road who he just met, and he could have been instead with Elizabeth Hurley, who I think is, hands down one of the most attractive women ever.
Right.
Yeah, I probably wouldn't go out with too many other women, but maybe Elizabeth Hurley I might go out with. And you.
Well, thank you. Dark and drunk.
Very dark.
You know what, though?
But I had a similar, speaking of dark and drunk, I actually had this same exact conversation several years ago with Jane Seymour. And it took 2 bottles of cake bread, which is my favorite wine.
Yeah.
And we shared a lot of stories that I'm sister sworn that I can't reveal. But even somebody like Jane Seymour has revealed some of these types of insecurities with respect to after you get divorced. It's,
Right.
you know, it's emotionally draining.
Well, and the thing that I think we should talk, it is important to point out, I didn't have any fear of performance issues. I've had a hysterectomy. I'm not embarrassed to say I might need a little KY. There are things that other women would find a little bit more troubling. Those weren't my issues. My issues was really taking the next step, recognizing that, oh my God, I'm back in my 20s. I'm back trying to find somebody who I meet, who I can connect with physically, maybe emotionally, maybe, you know, at a greater level. And while I'm searching, I'm probably just going to have to go. And my mother said, you're going to have to kiss a lot of frog. Are we allowed to swear on this?
Yes.
So my mother said,
especially if it's from your mom.
My mother said,
this is a direct quote, so of course it's allowed.
Here's a direct quote. Sally, you're going to have to kiss a lot of frogs. And I said to her, Mom, I'm going to have to fuck a lot of frogs. Yeah.
Okay, how many women would say that to their mother?
Well, I'm guessing me. That would be my sister.
One of my favorite frog quotes is, you have to kiss a lot of frogs until you meet your frog.
Yeah, that's kind of true. That's kind of true. And so I'm just trying to cast myself back into that mentality 4.5 years ago. It just seemed like I had to get past that first step. Just literally the virginity, the post-divorce virginity.
Okay, so tell us, how did it happen?
Oh, well, we went out to dinner. It was the same. It was Morton. It was it was maybe the third. I think there's some magic.
The third date, it either happens or it doesn't. It either happens or you move on.
Who made up that rule?
I don't know, but I'd like to thank her.
Or curse her, depending. But I do know that going out, I feel this relief on the first and second date. I'm like, well, there's no pressure.
No pressure here.
But it was mutual. So I made sure that we were at his place. I didn't want to be in my house.
Okay.
For some reason, I'm like, you know what? This is not my guy for longer than a short time. And I'm not bringing him into my house. So I can go to his house. And I did go, I sort of knew it was going to happen. I went to Nordstrom's and I said,
oh, you got sexy underwear?
I got sexy underwear, and God bless. You know, it's somewhere between sexy and orthopedic. You know, the older we are, it's not a flotation device. It's a lacy flotation device.
But you did not wear Spanx.
I did not wear Spanx. And the woman was so nice. As I'm picking out all these things, she goes, you're recently divorced? I said, yeah, how'd you know? She goes, you got a date? I said, how'd you know? She goes, okay, I'm not going to let you overdo this because let's just get you some starter.
I did the same thing. I went and got new lingerie, and the saleswoman was easily 80 years old. And I walk into it's a boutique bra store in the middle of horse country out here in the boonies of New Jersey.
Don't fool yourself. Those old ladies like to push the kinky stuff.
She was kinky. I walk in, I said, I'm recently divorced. I need all new lingerie. And she literally takes her two hands and grabs my breasts and to assess what size I needed.
Of course.
And she said, the problem with all you women who are recently divorced is you're wearing the same bra that you were the same size. You think you're the same size that you were when you graduated from college. And that is actually true in my case. And she said, and you're not the same size. So we have to get you the right size.
Well,
she picked out very appropriate losing your virginity undergarments, I have to say.
You see, well, actually, we haven't even gotten to, I'll tell you my story if you tell me yours.
Oh.
So I had my sexy lingerie, my sexy-ish lingerie, and we went back to his place. We had, I had one drink at dinner beforehand, knowing that I would say, let's have a drink when we get back to your house. Because I needed to have that liquid courage or that mental blottering out.
Well, it's also a process. Having a drink is sort of a more, okay, we're getting there kind of process. Right.
Let's go back to the safe sex. And this is where I fell down, I would say. We did have the safe sex talk, but we trusted that we were telling the truth. I had not had any sex other than my husband for 25 years. And this man was recently separated and said to me, and I knew from the first date that I was the first person he had reached out to and date. I mean, I knew, there's air quotes for those listening. How do you know? You don't know. I mean, I'm looking at my friend, the doctor, who's saying, don't trust anything. And I would tell that to my daughters. And here I was who just said, I'm going to accept.
Well, let me give you a caveat.
Okay.
I would never say don't trust anything and don't trust anyone and don't trust him, because I do believe that you can trust somebody if you're trusting your gut. The most important person to trust is yourself, right?
Right.
But here's the problem. How many people who believe with all their heart that they were in a mutually monogamous relationship for 25 years actually were in a mutually monogamous relationship? Right. They only know about their behavior. They don't actually know about their spouse's behavior. So that is kind of the real glitch there. And what I always say very glibly is, who's always the last one to know that she's no longer in a mutually monogamous relationship?
Right.
That's the glitch, is that they don't know. The other glitch is that, I met men who wanted to show me, and one did, their test results.
The doctor's report.
I thought, oh my God, is that the new aphrodisiac?
It is.
Showing me your test results. But here's the thing. Men can't be tested for everything that we could catch from them. So that's the glitch. And so the big question mark is HPV, or human papillomavirus. There's actually a huge bimodal distribution of HPV, which the highest incidence is is women in their 20s. But women in their 50s are now making a comeback with HPV.
Okay,
because a lot of women, and this is actually one of the questions that I got, from a very highly educated woman who is the number 3 person in a Fortune 500 company, who was 51 years old, and asked me if she still needed to use contraception now that she was dating again after divorce. And I said, well, are you still having your periods? And she said, yes. She said, but my doctor told me I'm over 50. I don't have to worry about it.
What doctor?
I said, you need a new doctor. I said, is this, Doctor Who? So yes, you're much less likely to get pregnant when you're over 50, but still 500 women a year do actually give birth to live children over 50, which means there are a lot more who are getting pregnant and obviously terminating the pregnancy or having miscarriages. So yes, if you're not in menopause, and that means not having had a period for a whole year, you still need contraception unless you want a baby. But since most women aren't using contraception or aren't thinking about condoms for birth control purposes, they're thinking they don't need it for safe sex purposes. And we all make decisions in the moment, whether it's right or not. I don't know if I'm willing to confess yet that I did the same thing that you did, but for different reasons.
I think it's time to confess, doctor.
But I did see his test results.
Listen, it's very...
And I was drunk.
Well,
and he was very, very good looking.
Well, that tops everything.
And I told you about it at the time. So, we had a conversation at that time.
But it's interesting because I realize, considering how informed I am, considering how I'm a smart person, and I'm certainly not a shy person, and yet I still find it difficult to insist on something as basic as a condom. And I go back to my sister who says, you're going to your college reunion? Here's a box of condoms. I'm like, what?
We love her.
I do love her, although it's much easier for her to say it. And I know this too. It's much easier for me to say to my daughters, I don't care if you're on the pill, you need to protect against sexually transmitted diseases. Or
did you ever buy condoms for your daughters?
I don't think I bought condoms for my daughters. I think I helped. Okay, you know what? I'm just going to say one thing. I think I'm going to leave my daughters
out of this conversation.
A little bit of privacy. I'm sure that they have crossed lines already. But put it this way. I will say this. Now that I promised not to leave them out, or to leave them out, let me bring them in.
They know better.
I've talked about everything with my children. So have I purchased everything for them? No. Have I made it available? Yes. And do we talk about it? Absolutely. There was,
and because I think with Betsy giving you a box of condoms, you know, you have only daughters. Betsy has sons and a daughter. I have a son and a daughter. And I think that mothers of sons are just more comfortable handing people a box of condoms.
Well, I will say this. I always thought the perfect graduation present for any young woman going off to college would be some kind of super cute little cosmetic case, and you put in some, you know, some Aleve and some Mucinex and Plan B. And Plan B, but condoms would make more sense. You know,
well, I gave each of my kids when they went to college and then when they got their own apartments a big, you know, Rubbermaid type box, and it actually has a label on it that I made called the CVS box. And there's everything in there that you could possibly need in the middle of the night that you could get from CVS.
Okay.
And it includes all of those things, as well as all of the cough, cold, flu medicines and the upset stomach medicines and Band-Aids and etc.
You're a good mom.
That's
a good present. Well, that's true. That's true. So let me just think, is there anything else? What I will say is that I did lose my virginity. It was about as exciting as the first time I lost my virginity, which is to say slightly disappointing and less of a big deal than I thought it should have been. And not painful, not earth-shattering, not horrible. Period. The end. Just a milestone to get through. And the one thing that was very disorienting, quite honestly, was falling asleep in that bed, waking up in the middle of the night to pee and thinking,
where's the bathroom?
Where the hell am I? Are those my clothes on the floor?
I thought you were going to say, where's the bathroom?
That was the third thought. I was already so confused. I'm like, God, are those my underpants? Those are pretty. I mean, it was very, very strange.
So how was it the next morning?
Well, you know what?
I'm assuming you spent the whole night.
I spent the whole night there.
Because that's one reason to stay at his place. One reason to stay at his place is that you can leave whenever you want to, and you don't have the awkwardness of asking him to leave if it's at your place.
Oh, right. I live in the suburbs. There is no privacy in the suburbs. People know if there's a car in my driveway all night long. People know if my car didn't come home in the driveway. People walk their dogs at all hours. They see where my lights are on. It's really strange. And so making sure that I wasn't home, you know what, I have a garage. They don't always know if I'm home or not home. But I remember feeling very much like this was a public thing if he had parked in my driveway the whole night. I wasn't going to be comfortable with that. I'm a little bit over that. I mean, I don't know when I really don't care, but I'm closer to really not caring. The next morning was a little awkward. What I really wanted to do, I don't know if this is a term, but I wanted to fucking flee. I wanted to do one more nasty and then leave. But so I wanted breakfast. We had to go out to breakfast.
I think that's a great term. And I once heard the great Charlie Sheen interviewed on the topic of, you're Charlie Sheen, why do you sleep with hookers? And he said, what women need to understand is men don't pay hookers for sex. They pay them to leave.
Yeah. Well, I worry that I might be a little bit
interesting.
I felt so little emotional connection. No guilt. No guilt. I actually felt like this was an important thing, but I didn't want to deal with breakfast. But we went out to breakfast. I feel like I was the guy. I'm like, how long do I need to?
How many times did you look at your watch?
A number of times. So did you feel that way?
I don't remember about breakfast. And I don't think I stayed the whole night, or if I did, I got up really, really early. Not necessarily intentionally, but I think I had to get to work.
Well, or you're not home and it just feels strange.
I didn't feel that way. And in my case, it was not disappointing. So, I can't speak to that issue.
Okay, I feel bad about Morton. I didn't say disappointing like he couldn't perform, just like it wasn't.
No, it just wasn't fireworks. I mean, in my case, the first gentleman I went out with, I was very lucky. I had a new friend who didn't know me and didn't know my ex at all. I had only known her for 3 weeks. When she said, you know how two women really hit it off, and eventually in the conversation, one of them says the four of us should go out sometime. And it was the first time I ever had to admit, like, well, there is no four of us.
Right.
And I said, I just got separated 3 weeks ago. And this woman was so fabulous. I hope she's listening. She didn't skip a beat. She had no sensitivity to the fact that it was so difficult or awkward for me to say, well, I've been separated for 3 weeks.
Yeah.
She said, oh, I know the perfect guy to fix you up with.
What?
And I said, what part of 3 weeks did you not understand?
Oh my God.
And she kept nagging and nagging and nagging for several months. She gave him my phone number. We talked on the phone. I said, look, I'm not ready. I'm recently separated. I was about to have major spinal surgery. And I told him, I said, look, I'm going to have major spinal surgery. There is a risk that it could be fatal. I could become paralyzed, or worse, I could get incontinence. That's how not interested I was in going on this date. But I hadn't seen his picture. And the night before my surgery, he sent me a very, very, very alluring picture with a very, very, very nice note saying, you're going to do great. And, when you're all recuperated, we'll go out and celebrate. So it was very nice. We stayed in touch by email for a long time. I still didn't pull the trigger. And then eventually it was my daughter who said, Mom, it's just dinner. And this woman, the mutual friend, said to me, okay, Donica, here's how it works. He calls you, you have to call back.
Yeah.
And then he called me with the perfect argument. He said, look, let's just go out to dinner and get it over with, because if we don't, she's going to keep harassing both of us.
Okay.
And that was a great argument. I was like, fine, sold. And I approached that dinner like it was a business dinner.
Right.
And he was perfectly lovely. And I was just like, I'm doing this. I'm like doing this dinner date. And then I'm going home and I'm going to put on my, fleece slippers and I'm going to be done with the evening. And he was a perfect gentleman, walked me to my car, kissed me goodnight, and the earth moved.
Oh, man.
The whole earth moved. And I was thinking, oh my God, where did that come from? And then he said out loud, oh my God, where did that come from? And so that kind of changed the nature of our relationship pretty quickly.
Okay, I'm just going to parse that whole story now. And I'm going to be the voice of every divorced woman listener listening to this podcast.
Wait, did you just become the interviewer here? I didn't agree to that.
I'm just going to tell you. No, but you did when you signed me up. What you just told is somewhere between a fairy tale and a Disney movie of every divorced woman's dreams. So number one, you met a woman who's a fast bosom friend. Number two, she says what you think you're going to hear, but you never hear, which is, oh, I have the perfect guy for you. Let me just say this. I'm not a terrible person. Nobody fixes me up. Okay?
Well, and I'm going to say this. I think that's where the whole sisterhood has to get their act together. And also your bike boys. And I think that if we ask,
okay, wait, Donica, nobody seems to know. None of my friends seem to know divorced men. How did this woman, here's where I'm pulling it apart. How did this woman, number one, know a fabulous single man who was genuinely handsome and sounds like a nice guy, who remained unattached for all those months when he
was very recently divorced. And I remember reading an article in Cosmopolitan magazine when I was in college. And the reason I remember reading this article is because I made so much fun of this article. And I showed it to all my friends at lunch. And I said, this is the most hysterical article ever. But Helen Gurley Brown was recommending to all her, what did she call them? Mouskins or
something like
Mousies or something. She was recommending in this editorial that single women should always be aware of men who are recently separated because they clearly have been married, they were used to being married, and they probably want to get matched up again right away. So she said as soon as they break up, that's the time to meet them. And I have to say, that was my experience with the gentleman I now fondly refer to as my transitional guy.
So why didn't
and that was the same exact situation with my current guy who will be my forever guy.
Yeah, no, I'm going to die alone and you're going to be happy. I'm so happy for you.
We'll be the Golden Girls.
Yeah, I got a bunch of
Betsy.
girlfriends. I got a whole bunch of girlfriends forever. And you know what? If I die alone, I die alone. It happens.
You won't die alone. You have 2 fabulous children. You have an amazing family.
Yeah.
And I think the big difference, you made a really interesting comparison, I think, to losing your virginity after divorce to the first time around. And I think there's a lot of huge differences. Hopefully we're a lot better self-educated and knowledgeable about ourselves and our needs and our desires. A good male friend of mine, who's also a cyclist, by the way, said to me when I told him I was getting divorced and, you know, how I just didn't have time for, you know, these bullshit dating games. And he said, that's because you're in the FU 50s. I said, what does that mean? He said, you're in your 50s and you're just out of fucks to give. You're just done with, you know, games. But I think that having been said, if you've decided, and this is purely optional, but if you decided that you want to meet somebody and you want to be in a relationship again, I think there are some really good tips that we could talk about for our listeners who are saying things like you, like, where are the men that my friends are supposed to introduce me to? My number one suggestion is going to the gym, because for the same reason Al Capone robbed banks, because that's where the money is, the gym is where all the men are. And around here, the word is among divorcees that there are certain grocery stores that are the best places to meet single people of a certain age. And my current beau, who was my forever beau, has told me that women used to hit on him all the time in the grocery store. And I finally asked him, like, how does that work? Like, how do you even know somebody's hitting you on you at the grocery store? He said, oh, they would always come up to and ask me to reach things for them on the shelves.
I'm 5'10".
I'm like, honey, you're 6'1". Of course they're asking. He's like, yeah, but then they get into a whole conversation about, do you like this detergent better than that detergent? And I'm a guy. Why are they asking me about my detergent preferences?
But did he ever go out with any of these women?
He did not.
Yeah, so that's.
But again, I met him literally 5 minutes after he was divorced.
Yeah. No, I you know.
And I was concerned about being the transitional woman. And I told him up front I was not interested in that. And he said, don't worry about that. And so I didn't worry about that.
Well, okay, so back to losing your virginity. There's a certain amount of what we can distill from this end of the conversation to the beginning, which is don't worry about so many things.
Mm-hmm.
I wish I could tell my newly divorced self, don't worry about being self-conscious naked. The guy is self-conscious too. Don't worry about, will it ever happen? It will happen. Mm-hmm. Don't worry about, is he going to be your right guy forever? Don't worry about, can I make sure I can never see him again? Don't worry about all of these things, because it's just another life stage that is unfamiliar that you will get through.
And worry is perfectly useless as an emotion, because worrying is just borrowing stress from the future.
Right. So well, that's so interesting. I actually feel like guilt is holding on to stress from the old. You know, it's just an abstract concept. Let it go.
Right.
Let it go.
Right. And I think you sound like you're from Frozen. I won't ask you to sing unless you want to. I will not. No. Unless you want to. You said I could ask you anything.
You can. I did not say I would agree.
That's a good point. But I think actually that's another good rule. So I have had this conversation with so many of my friends because I think I did the online dating thing really well. And I have some really good tips for people. And I would love to hear your advice to our listeners who are going through this about the online dating thing. And don't say, I give up. That's not one of the.
Are you want to talk about it now?
Yes. Yes. Well, unless you want to tell me more about losing your virginity.
Well, the only thing I want to get back to the one funny story I have, and that was from this summer. And it's from what I predetermined would be a one night stand in the middle of dinner. I predetermined it because we had been online, not sparring, but sharing really epistolary foreplay. I mean, he was, banter, but
flirting.
It was well beyond flirting. It wasn't sexting. It was just, he was a good writer. I'm a writer.
You're a very good writer.
Well, thank you. But we were distant enough that we couldn't just meet for coffee. We were waiting for a Saturday night, and it was 4th of July. There were things that were in between. So it turned out that before we actually met for dinner, we had probably had almost 3 weeks of a lot of going back and forth.
Did you talk on the phone?
We talked on the phone. And he was cute and fit. He was my guy that you just described. I mean, I just thought, wow, I think I showed a picture of him to my sister. She's like, you found your guys. I think I did. So excited. But
you never know if they're going to actually look like the picture. That's the other thing they lie about.
Those pictures were 30 pounds ago on his part, for sure.
And some were 30 years ago.
Right. Mm-hmm. And I could forgive that. I mean, it's a little disappointing, but okay. But about halfway through dinner, we talked politics, and suffice it to say, we were on absolute opposite sides. And there's certain, and I can date somebody who has a different political philosophy. I did for a year and a half. I was in love with somebody who was on the other side. But I have a couple of make or break
deal breakers.
Deal breaker for me is the abortion issue.
Absolutely.
And this is something where, and plenty of conservative people are fine with abortion rights. You know, they really are. They're not. Anyway,
what I always say is you can be pro-choice and anti-abortion. Because being anti-abortion means I'm never going to have an abortion.
Right.
I'm going to make sure nobody I'm in a sexual relationship with ever has to have an abortion.
Exactly.
But being pro-choice means it's up to everybody else to make their decision. And that's where Barbara Bush fell out.
Yeah. Really. Yeah. So this guy says, not only is he on a different political spectrum than I am, but he just says that abortion is wrong in every case, including rape and incest.
Oh, wow. Who are you dating? Marco Rubio?
Well, so I just want to say, like, I had two choices in that dinner. One was to get up and walk away. I mean, just say, you know what, this is not right. I mean, I could have done it. And I said, you know what? Or what I did instead, which was hail the waiter, get another very big cocktail, and decide this guy is so cute. And he still was cute.
Even 30 pounds overweight.
Yes.
So what does that tell you about all your anxieties about?
Well, no, I agree. Absolutely. But what I will tell you is we dark and drunk, had consensual sex. I knew I wasn't going to ever see him again because I was just so, I think that I either did something along the lines of Erica Young with Fear of Flying and the Zipless Fuck, or I just used him. I'm not quite sure where. But the next morning in the light of day, I looked down and there was a rash all over his lower area. And I thought, oh my God, look at your face. I wish your listeners could see your face because I'm sure that's what my face was like. I'm like, oh my God, I think I may have just contracted herpes. And I mean,
or poison ivy.
Well, even with a condom, it doesn't cover all that other area. And I said to him, oh my God, do you have herpes? That is a sentence I have never said. And he said, and this is where you can't make this up. He goes, no, I have razor burn. I did some manscaping.
I'll tell you a very funny story. When I was a GYN resident at Temple University, every week there was a different professor who would do something called Grand Rounds, which is a big lecture with everybody on some topic. We're all sitting there. And this guy opens up his lecture with a giant slide filling the whole screen of like the lower third of the penis with the most disgusting lesion you have ever seen.
I would to say I've never seen that. So but okay.
I am happy to say I only saw that once again later on. But he, of course, then, asked all of us to, raise our hands if we had any idea what this might be. And we came up with every STD imaginable, even like the really, really rare ones. And finally, he said, well, I show this slide to GYN residents every year for two reasons. The first is to remind you what a penis looks like. The second is to remind you how important taking a history is. He said, this is a zipper injury.
That's so interesting.
And none of us, had any idea what that could have been. So that was pretty funny.
Injury. Well, I imagine that's a painful injury.
It was painful to look at, I'll tell you that. So anyway, he confessed that they were razor burns. He was manscaping.
Yeah.
And how did you exit stage left?
All right, so I will tell you how that ended. So it was in my house because I've gotten over that fear, and I wanted to be home. And he had to go back he lived in another state. He had
Wow.
Well, that's why it took so long. He lived about almost 2 hours away. And I made coffee, we had breakfast, and he thought that he had the best date ever, and he couldn't wait to see me, and I could not wait to have him go. And I took a deep breath, and I sent an email that I knew he would not get until he got home, saying,
Clever.
I don't know if it's clever, but I just said, you know what, I am racked with feelings that do not feel good to me. I really, I need you to know, last night was very consensual. I enjoyed every minute of it, but I cannot see you again because I feel so strongly that our perspectives on abortion are so far apart that that's a deal breaker for me.
Mm-hmm.
And in retrospect, I probably should have told you that before I invited you to spend the night. That is what I regret, not spending the night with you, but not telling you that.
Mm-hmm.
I really felt like it was.
And good for you for being very candid.
Oh, it was hard. We had a whole long back and forth. Why he wanted to know why couldn't I surmount those feelings, those differences? Why couldn't two intelligent people have divergent feelings about certain issues? And there was so much that was good, and so much that was good. I mean, well, on paper, we only had that date, but the point is, I stuck to my guns, and it was
good for you.
Well, I don't know. I don't feel good about it, but
Okay.
I'm very relieved it was razor burn. I don't know.
And that's one of the disadvantages of dark and drunk.
It's a huge disadvantage. And also, actually, I have a question for you because I was bringing this up with that I would be talking to you, being interviewed. If, let's say somebody does have genital herpes,
mm-hmm.
and you do have sex using a condom, but can the herpes disease be spread around the base of the penis because the condom doesn't actually cover that area?
Yes, but in general.
That's for my niece. That was my niece's question.
So the answer is yes.
Yes, it can be transmitted.
Yes, it can be transmitted. Much less likely. It's much less likely that type 2 or genital herpes would be in that area. However, what makes this a little confusing to everybody is there's another type of herpes, and that's type 1 herpes, and that's the kind that you get on your lips, the cold sores. It's still herpes.
Yeah.
It's just not that herpes, but you can get type 1 herpes down there, and I'll let you connect the dots how that would happen.
Or you can give type 1.
You can give type. So one of the questions I had from a 52.
I was not given any herpes down.
You weren't giving it, you weren't getting it. But one of the questions I had from a 52-year-old woman who was recently divorced and dating again said, if he has herpes, can I still get it if we just have oral sex? And I was well, it depends on who's doing what to whom.
But I don't understand. Who are these intelligent women who think that they can't get pregnant if they still have a period? Who think that you can't? I mean, see how quick I am to judge, says the woman who trusted the man. I mean, the hypocrisy in my own life studies.
So many of them are drunk and in the dark. Many of them just don't know the information. So, I think that's why it's important that we have these conversations about what kinds of things you do need to think about, that you do need to have contraception if you're not actually in menopause, that you still need STD protection. Yeah. You still do have to have a candid conversation with the guy. One of the conversations that I had with an older woman who was dating again after her one divorce and one widowhood, she was dating a guy who was a widower. And I very innocently said, what did his wife die of? She said, some type of female cancer. I said, well, could you find out what type of female cancer? And it was cervical cancer. Yeah. Cervical cancer is caused by HPV, which is a sexually transmitted infection.
But this circles back to the HPV. You said, women our age need to be especially careful, well, all women, of HPV infection. But I'm a woman who came of age before the vaccine. Mm-hmm. My children are vaccinated. I wasn't. Mm-hmm. I'm somebody who has been sexually tested several times since my divorce. And
you've had, and that includes an HPV test, which is a separate test, not just a pap smear.
But I've already, long before my divorce, had irregular, I'm going to get the terminology wrong, but I have been exposed to HPV.
Okay.
So I have that. I've had the
colposcopy.
Yes, it hurts unless you cough when they sniff it out.
Or unless you pre-medicate.
Right, which I didn't do. But here's the thing. So I already have exposure.
Okay.
Is the right way to say it?
Yes.
Where I'm being just a person talking to my doctor. I've already been exposed to HPV. That doesn't mean that I have cancer. It just means that the virus lives in me and I have a greater proclivity for developing the cancer. Is that correct?
So you have a greater proclivity for developing cervical changes, which can lead to precancerous cells, which can lead to cancer. So knowing you, I know that you go for your GYN exam every single year.
I do.
And your doctor is probably going to do your pap smear every single year. She's going to pick up any changes immediately.
Right.
And you've already had your colposcopy, which is how I know that. Did she take a biopsy at the time?
I think she did.
Okay.
You're asking me to remember. I will ask at my next appointment, which is this week.
That's when you want to be drunk and in the dark, is when you're having a colposcopy. But you're getting the medical care and follow-up that you need.
Well,
now, I'm sure your doctor told you that there are almost 100 strains of HPV. It's a virus. There's many different strains. So you could have, at this point, one strain of HPV, but with additional exposure, you could get another strain of HPV.
So in other words,
all strains are created equally. There are several strains that are what we call the oncogenic strains, which are the cancer-causing strains or the strains more likely to cause cancer. So I don't know if she told you which strain you had. The HPV test doesn't identify necessarily all of them, but it does identify whether you have the strain that's more likely to cause cancer or the strain that's more likely to cause genital warts, for example.
So, but my question is, and I think you've just answered it to my dismay, even though I think to myself, oh, I've already been exposed to HPV, I likely haven't been exposed to all 100.
Right.
And so therefore I still have to use the goddamn condom.
Well, and not only that,
is that right?
But yes, but this is also a public service message for any woman who sleeps with that guy after you, is that you've now potentially exposed him to that HPV.
Great.
So he could potentially being passed on to somebody else. So, these are the kinds of things that, we need to think about with respect to this. And it's not an easy thing to grapple with.
So when you found your forever guy, did you make him go to the doctor and get the final? Because now you're done with.
No, because I took a thorough history. We had lots of talks. He had lots of tests. And at that point, I just felt like, this is not going to be a short-term relationship. We're in this, together, whatever happens.
Yeah.
And that's kind of how we approached things. Now, here's the tricky question that no doctor has the answer to.
Yes.
And I've asked many of my friends who are gynecologists this question just to see if anybody has a better answer than I have.
I'll have an answer. Let's see.
So suppose you meet somebody, suppose you hit it off, suppose you decide this is not going to be a short-term relationship. You're going to be together for as long as you guys are mutually enjoying each other. How long do you use condoms? Do you use condoms for 6 months? Do you use condoms for a year? Do you use condoms for the first 3 years? And we really don't have a good answer for that in medicine, especially, for older people. So where pregnancy is not an issue. In younger people, we say, use condoms in addition to your contraception until you're ready to get pregnant. In older people, what is our answer?
Well, so here's my question. Is there any way to test a man for what strains of HPV he's
Not that I know of. In a research setting, yes. There are now home tests that men can take where they can actually urinate and they can get a positive or negative. But I'd have to get back to you on whether they can detect the exact strain, because
that's okay.
Or maybe
I'm never
if it was really quick and really sly, I could just Google it while we're on the phone. But let's get to this issue of deal breakers, because I think this is something that, you know, a lot of the women I have talked to have just not been clever about this.
Okay. And by the way, until I started dating after divorce, I didn't even know that was a term. But apparently that is the universal.
In our first conversation, I told you about that. That's my whole thing, is talking about deal breakers.
Yeah, but I didn't.
You didn't listen.
Well, until you go out on a date and somebody else says to you, here, what are your deal breakers? I'm like, what are you talking about?
Right. So think about this in advance. What I advise women is to do this when they're creating their online profile. And the other thing is, when you create your online profile, if you're going to do online dating, which I highly recommend, and I could be, the spokesperson for Match.com, because I just had a great experience. I did not have a great experience on eHarmony, however. I joined eHarmony. I filled out gazillions and zillions of questions. The first guy, they match you up. You don't get to choose on eHarmony. The first guy they matched me up with was my ex-husband. I felt like I had been punched in the stomach. I called them up immediately. I said, I want my money back.
On the other hand, that actually is pretty telling.
On the other hand, on paper, we were very similar. And I guess on paper, we were a pretty good match.
And by the way, I'm a writer. It is astonishing how amusing and clever my online profile is, and how poorly it is doing in terms of vetting the kinds of guys that I find interesting. I seem to attract men with some college, not a college degree. I seem to attract some men with very low income, very low income. And I'm not saying I need a lot, but construction workers, and now I don't know who I've just alienated, but
you've just alienated all the construction workers. But I think here's where we get to deal breakers. And I think the most useful tool on Match.com, my favorite button, and I realized I didn't know about it in the beginning, is the block button. So at first I only blocked men who were offensive. But then I learned, just block every single person who's sent to you who's unsuitable, because the algorithm then learns who's unsuitable to you and why. And then they won't come up again 6 months later. So you're kind of like weeding through. But as far as the profile, you are a phenomenal writer. And I think
apparently can't send anything into the sea and pull out a fish I want.
Well, but you may be keeping away some of the fish you don't want. But I think the best advice I got is to write your profile as though you're writing to the man you're trying to attract, and to make it very personal to that person. And I always recommend to people, include in there what you're interested in and what you're not interested in. But the fact is, what I have heard from men friends, and I admit that every date I went on, I also used it as like a research experiment to find out what the men's perspective was on this whole profile thing. And I was actually thinking of writing a book about it, but then I just couldn't even take notes. It was just, it was too much.
Oh, I've got the notes.
But I also remember a lot of the stories. And the best quote I heard about online dating is that every date is a good evening or a great story.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
And so I have a lot of great stories, but I also asked, on your first date, you have to talk about something. It's kind of awkward. If you think about it, if you meet somebody at the grocery store or in real life or at a wedding, say you meet somebody at a wedding, you have already a basis in common for conversation. Like, so how do you know Joe and Sally? And, what brought you here and where are you from and all those things. When you meet somebody online, it's kind of in a vacuum. You don't have any of those other things in general, unless you happen to go to the same college, and I'll tell you a funny story about that, or unless you happen to live in the same town and know some of the same people. And I'll tell you a funny story about that. But the thing I say is, the best advice I got is this thing about write your profile as though you're writing to the person that you want to attract. But the next best advice is, the only purpose of your profile is to attract people you're interested in and detract people you are not interested in. And the only reason you should be emailing somebody after that is if you're interested in seeing if you're interested in a phone call. The only purpose of the phone call is to see if you're interested in a date. And the only purpose of the first date is to see if you're interested in a second date. I know tons of women who go way beyond that. They want to research everything about the guy and see if they would be compatible for 25 years before they even meet. Yeah. Now, that having been said, you have to be very, very selective. And let's discuss the deal breakers. We've already established that for you and also for me, I wouldn't date anybody who was anti-choice.
Yeah.
Not just because of how I feel about abortion and choice, because I'm menopausal, so it's not an issue for me. But to me, it says something about their mentality, that they think they can judge what should be right for other people. I don't like that. And I'm not saying that's right or wrong. It's just not good for me.
Right. I don't have the podcast that you have, so I am saying it's wrong.
No, I don't have a problem, again, with somebody who has a belief system. But if they want to impose it on me, that's a whole different story.
To impose it on me, I got a problem with that.
Yeah, I got a problem with that if they want to impose it on me. Are you hearing me okay?
Most of the time.
I'm getting nasty red signals from my microphone. I don't know why. I need better technology. Anyway, so the next deal breaker for me that was very easy is smoking. Smoking is a deal breaker.
That's easy.
Being with somebody who's an alcoholic or has been, that's a deal breaker for me. Not saying it's wrong, just saying it's wrong for me.
Would you dismiss men who write down cigar aficionado?
Yes.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Even if they didn't smoke around me, I don't like the smell on their clothes. And then also for me, I have the additional issue that my daughter is fatally allergic to cigarette or cigar smoke. So it's just a no. Cat lover would be a no.
Oh, completely no.
Not that there's anything wrong with it. It just wouldn't work for me.
Right.
The other thing that did not work for me, and I got some pretty hostile emails from men about this when I rejected them, I thought very nicely because of this, is geographic undesirability. I was really not interested in meeting somebody who lived more than 45 minutes away from me. That was an issue with my transitional guy. He was 50 minutes away, and it really gets old really quickly. So, that was a problem. So one guy lived 4 states away and contacted me. And there were 500 reasons why we weren't suitable for each other. But I said, thank you for your interest, but I'm not really interested in dating somebody who lives in Virginia. And he sent me this hostile email about, what do you think? You're going to meet somebody who lives next door? We could make it work.
Yeah.
And then I was just like, block.
Yeah.
And that's how you just deal with those kinds of things. But what are some of your other deal breakers?
Well, let's see.
You said college education.
Absolutely.
That's extremely important to me because I'm really an education snob.
Yeah. For me at this point in my life, they have to be happily employed.
Mm-hmm.
They have to have a job and like the job. It's astonishing to me how many people do not fit that criteria.
Mm-hmm.
They have to be active.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a very active person. They need to, I'm trying to think deal breakers. I mean, it's really, I like to joke, no Fox in the bedroom, meaning I really don't want to be with somebody who watches Fox News. But
I'm more strict about that. I'm a no TV in the bedroom kind of girl.
Oh, I like TV in the bedroom. Oh, but yeah.
It wasn't a deal breaker for me, but I don't have a working television in my bedroom.
Right. And by the way, I think there's a lot to be said for that. And the truth of the matter is, I don't want want that to be a deal breaker. Again,
Mm-hmm.
I like to think that I'm big enough that we could entertain different politics.
Mm-hmm.
But the job, I have a joke. They can't sue me. I went on a date. Well, again, these are my hot buttons. They have to be happily employed because that was a problem in my marriage, was the happy employment.
Mm.
They have to not sue me. I went on a second date on a bike riding date. This is a very litigious guy, so I'm just gonna say things like, we'll call him Dr. Dick. But he hit me. We both fell. And he got very injured, and he sued me for $1.5 million.
Oh!
That is another. I mean, who wins the worst bad date?
You win. I have never heard anything like that.
It could, because it's just it's.
He didn't win, did he?
Do you know how much he got?
No.
It went on for 2.5 years. We were 3 days away from court, and my insurance company settled. Even though my insurance company wanted to take him to court because I had such a strong case against this. By the way,
this was a date. It was an accident.
Well, and it was an accident he caused. He was behind me.
And so why did your insurance company settle?
Because at the end of the day, I've learned so much. At the end of the day, it was going to go to a jury trial because it counts as, I think officially, a he said, she said, which is something you alluded to in your previous podcast about sexual assault. It often is a he said, she said. Doesn't matter how credible somebody is. If it goes to a jury, the insurance company says, we don't know how that will end. And he's asking for 1.5 million. We don't think he'll win, but we can't control what a jury will say.
So what did he win?
$150,000. He broke 8 ribs, punctured a lung, dislocated his shoulder, and needed surgery on his thumb, and he's an orthopedic surgeon. But he hit me.
But aside from that, it was a date.
You know what though? But it wasn't.
Do you know that orthopedic injuries are also the number one injuries that happen during sex? I wonder if Dr. Dick knows that. So what's he going to do? Sue a woman if he, gets an orthopedic injury in bed with somebody?
I will just say Dr. Dick should be his name. And
it is now.
I joked because he invited me for, the date was meant to be, we'll go for a bike ride and then maybe a hot tub and a glass of wine in the hot tub. And when the date ended up in the ER room and then ended up in the court, I joked saying, I'm so glad it ended up in the ER and not the hot tub. What else can I say? What else can I say?
Oh my God.
You can't sue me. You should, these are deal breakers.
Oh my God. I actually, when I was in the hiring nanny business, one of my deal breakers for hiring a nanny was anybody who previously sued a prior employer. But I never, ever, ever. It's so rare at this point in my life that somebody tells me I never heard something I never heard before. But I have never, ever, ever heard of anybody who was on a date and got sued because of something that happened on the date.
You're welcome.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you, and I'm saying you're welcome.
Oh my
God! I can
God.
hear you perfectly. So I don't know if it's mine or yours. I haven't.
My microphone is sending me red signals.
I'm sorry.
All right. So other deal breakers.
I'd like to say things like they need a sense of humor or they.
Yeah, but those aren't. That's not an absolute.
I don't think. You know what? I would agree with you. Let's go back to yours. I don't want a smoker. Mm-hmm. I can't deal with any kind of, or I choose not to enter into a relationship with addiction issues, whether it's alcohol or drugs. Somebody asked me once, do you do any drugs? And because that's his deal breaker. And I said, well, can we define drugs? Because I think it's tremendously exciting that marijuana might be legal in more and more states. That being said, I've now been to some of those states, dabbled in a little bit, and I think I'm too old. I'm so sad.
There's no such thing as too old. It just might not be your thing. Just
it's not
like
my thing, but
I no longer like chocolate ice cream. I used to love every kind of ice cream. Chocolate is just not my thing anymore.
Right.
We change over time.
Right. So I don't think I'm ever going to be happy with somebody who's
a stoner
or any kind of drugs. But I don't say it's a deal breaker because it's a little bit like social drinking, depends on how you use it. I think I might say a deal breaker. This sounds crazy. These are basically, I don't want anybody with cats. I don't really love dogs. So it better be a small dog, a well-behaved dog, or a hypoallergenic. I'm afraid to have too many lists that are hurdles.
Okay. What about height? I found out when I was done, what I decided was to use this process also, this dating process, to learn about myself. And one of the things that I learned was that height was important to me. It was, and I'm not 5'10". I'm not 5'10". I'm 5'5".
And how tall is?
My beau is 6'1", which is perfect.
I hate you. I cannot tell you. Every woman I know who's short, and I consider everybody under 5'8". They get the tall
average.
Well, I'm 5'10".
It's usually the short women who get the tall men.
Oh yeah, no, my sister-in-law is 5 feet tall and my brother's 6'3". I know.
You couldn't date him anyway.
Well, no, I that's true. But that was an example of.
Yeah. So I promised to tell you this story about one of the things that my profile evolved over time. originally I did, where it asks what college you went to, I didn't put Princeton because we always used to joke that was an immediate turnoff. But then I added Princeton because I said, I don't want to be with a guy who is insecure about the fact that I went to a fine academic institution. So I put it as in order to detract men who might be intimidated by that. Okay, anyway, so I saw a guy.
Why isn't my Dartmouth education frightening away the construction workers? And by the way,
because they're not reading your profile, they're only looking at your picture. And that's what I was going to say. You could write whatever you want in your profile, but the fact is that most men are only looking at your pictures.
So what do you put up for pictures?
What you put up your best face possible, and and they also want to see a whole body picture because they want to see your body profile matching what you say it is.
Did you put up a bathing suit photo?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. First of all, there is one bathing suit photo of me online from when I was a college freshman, because I, of course, was a competitive swimmer. But I don't want to be involved with anybody who needs to see me in a bathing suit photo online. Many men, I was shocked how many men put topless pictures of themselves when they really shouldn't. But I think it's because they wish women would put up topless photos. And again, I don't really want to be involved with anybody who's that superficial. So a little superficial I can handle, and I can admit I'm also a little superficial. I also didn't have a picture at all in the beginning because I was concerned. My issue
you're a public figure.
And I'm also Googleable by my first name. So, you don't need the more. If you just Google Donica, it's going to be most likely me.
So did you get people reaching out to you with your faceless picture?
Yes, but not the caliber of person who I wanted reaching out to me. So I eventually said, okay, what the hell? I'll put my picture, and I will put and then for a long time, I only used my first initial instead of my first name. And I got some very hostile emails from men about, what are you trying to hide with this D thing? So then I put DEE. So it looked like that was my actual first name.
Right.
But I did get contacted by this one man who was a Princeton alum, and he was geographically unsuitable, but his photo made him look like, one of the Baywatch body lifeguards. But I knew it was from 1976 because he was wearing the bathing suit that was all the rage then, which was the Olympic bathing suit from 1976. And he said he was 51 or 52 years old, which I was the same age as I was. Maybe it was 50. He was the same age as I was at the time. So I emailed him back and I said, look, if you looked like this and actually went to Princeton and were actually 50 years old, I would know who you are. So he confessed that he changed his age for search purposes, and he was before my time at Princeton. But I did say to him, look, I'm going to an alumni function on this date. If you want to meet me, come meet me the old fashioned way, show up at this club on Prospect Street and introduce yourself. And he did. And he looked nothing like his photo, including being completely bald. Not that there's anything wrong with it. And that's not one of my deal breakers.
Not at all.
But in the picture, he had, he was like 25 years old and had a full head of blonde hair.
Yeah.
Like, did you think I wasn't going to notice?
It's actually pretty interesting. I think women age better than men. That is something I've actually come to realize over time. And I don't think I had any idea of that when I first started.
I think there's more things that we do to ourselves. For starters, makeup. Most men are not wearing makeup. For starters, then hair color. Haircuts. We can look dramatically different with a different haircut. Hair.
But I have to say, I really
having hair.
Being bald is not a deal breaker, although
it's not a deal breaker for me.
I'll tell you something that I do. I'm sorry, men who are out there with this. It's something a term I'm coining called the half halo.
Oh, my beau has that, and I'm very into it now.
Okay. And you know what? For the right guy, it's better than a comb over.
Nothing's worse than a comb over. A comb over is saying, I'm trying to, hide this, and nobody's fooled.
Right. It just,
and that's the difference. There's a difference between a deal breaker and a turnoff, or a deal breaker and something that's not a preference. But I will tell you a funny story about you. And you said you were shocked when you met this guy who didn't look anything like his picture. I met a guy once for a first date who had a very, very attractive picture. Very nice guy. We had a great exchange. We met for dinner. I was actually early, which never, ever, ever happens. He showed up and I could never play poker. You know, the expressions register immediate in my face. And I registered shock when I first saw him. And he said, "What's the matter?" And he said, "Don't I look like my picture? Didn't you recognize me?" And I said, "Yes, I'm just shocked that you look exactly like your picture. Nobody I've ever met before has looked exactly like their picture."
It's really interesting you say that, because I've had a number of men say to me, "Oh my God, you look just like your picture."
Mm-hmm.
I've had a number of people say that, and I'm stunned that that's surprising. I'm like, well, the picture's 3 days old. What's the big deal? The other thing is, I've had an alarming number of men say, "Oh, you're much prettier in your picture." And that doesn't feel good either. I don't think my pictures are so bad.
No, but pictures are static. And, you know, I think you're gorgeous and I love you.
You're my friend.
But you are much more attractive in person than in your picture, because your main attraction is you have this phenomenal sense of humor and smile and energy. And that doesn't always come across in a, you know, 2-dimensional photograph.
Well,
You're
let me
a
just say,
3-dimensional person.
this is a lovely podcast for my use. Thank you.
And hopefully it's lovely for everybody. So we unfortunately have to wrap it up. So what would be the number one tip that you would give to women for losing their virginity after divorce?
You know, the glib tip is...
We love glib.
Yeah, is dark and drunk. Okay, but the real tip is have the confidence to just go out and get it over with. Whether it's the perfect guy or not the perfect guy, just do it, because I found it liberating. It was the gateway to the life after divorce and after marriage.
And I think that's a great advice, except I think my advice would probably be the exact opposite. You know, my advice would be, don't feel like you have to just do it and get it over with. Wait for the right guy and the right opportunity. You know, and now obviously I'm in a situation where the right guy came first.
Right.
So it's, you know, easy for me to say, but I think my whole perspective after divorce would have been different if I had just said, okay, I have to just do this and get it over with, which is what I did do the first time I lost my virginity,
right? Well,
which was, you know, really disappointing. But I just felt like it's now or never, you know, and it was with somebody I was, you know, very close with and knew very well. And I just felt comfortable. And I did feel like I got to get this over with.
You asked for my advice.
I appreciate your advice.
That's my advice.
And I think that's the take home lesson for everybody is the advice you get from everybody is going to be a little bit different.
Yeah.
And you take the advice that works for you. The thing I think I also tried to do, and what I would advise people, is I tried to learn something about me on every date.
Oh, good Lord. That's a whole other burden. That's all I can do to get into my pants. My own pants.
Well, that was one thing that I also learned is maybe, you know, you're more comfortable in a bigger size pants.
No, I learned that.
I haven't got to the elastic waistband yet, but that's also very tempting. And I loved your line in one of your articles, which, by the way, I did tweet the Chicago Tribune this morning, that even though I live in New Jersey, I am now a proud subscriber of the Chicago Tribune online edition, just so I can read your columns.
Thank you.
The other thing I said to them, and I want everybody who's listening to tweet this to the Chicago Tribune, is that we want your column to have a name. You know, it should be a named column. So I am happy, and I think I'm going to invite everybody to tweet you at Hey Gal Sal, because we're dragging you into this Twitter sphere, kicking and screaming. I want everybody to tweet you with their suggestions for what your column should be called. And then I'm going to commit on your behalf that you're going to answer every single one of those tweets.
I will do my best, Mom. Thank you very much. But
then the thing I need everybody to tweet me is I need everybody to tweet me at Dr. Dunica with their questions about the most embarrassing questions they have, because I am starting a Facebook Live show every Wednesday at 3 p.m. Eastern time. 2 p.m. Eastern time.
Okay.
And it's going to be called Ask Dr. Dunica Your Most Embarrassing Questions.
Oh, I will join that.
You can definitely. You're going to have awesome, embarrassing questions.
I will. And by the way, that's an hour after my deadline for my column. So I'm always celebrating at that point.
The only thing I worry about with you joining in is that your most embarrassing questions are going to be about me.
There's a possibility. believe it. Your listeners are going to want to know.
They are going to want to know. And I have tried to be very open and honest. And I think that would be my main advice for dating after 50 or after 40, or quite honestly, at any age, is to be open and honest with each other and not play ridiculous mind games.
Oh, yeah.
Because we're too old for that. We're over that. We're not teenagers. And it just makes the relationship so good and so easy.
Yes.
And yes, I am talking from experience now. I never knew a relationship could be easy. Who knew?
Who knew?
It's not supposed to be. It doesn't need to be work. It doesn't have to be work if you're just open and honest. And if you make a mistake, you say you're sorry and you try to make it better and you move on. So anyway, I have some other questions for you as we wrap up. We ask all our guests these questions. And my first question is, what's the most unique, memorable, interesting, or hysterical encounter or experience you ever had in a ladies' room?
All right. Well, I wish it were funnier, but it is actually, it was actually pretty traumatic.
Oh.
So I was about 24. So I was out of college and in my second job at the very, very macho Outside magazine. Which was it's extreme sports, rock climbing. You know, John Krakauer, who wrote Into Thin Air, was somebody I worked with. That was the environment. And I went to the bathroom, and I just peed blood. And I was 24 in a work environment with almost exclusively men. And I sat in that ladies' room, convinced that I was dying, and that I had cancer, or that all of these things. And I didn't know what to do. And honestly, I mean, it's not a funny, it's not a sharing. There was nobody to talk to. And what I found out later was, of course, what we all know, I had a urinary tract infection.
Well, we all know who've had that experience. And that happened to me when I was a freshman in college.
Right. I had never had one. And at the time in 1986, I had, a 1,000-year-old male gynecologist who said to me, "Oh, you must be sleeping with a horse." That's how inconsiderate this man was. On the other side, the guy I was sleeping with was pretty much a horse.
So he was right. Just because he was white doesn't mean he was sensitive.
Exactly. But I, to this day, I remember that fear, that isolation, that literally cold, harsh environment, and that fear in the ladies' room. So I wish it could be a bonding and a humorous experience. More recently, I got a job in a ladies' room because I was listening. That's
a good one.
Yeah, I was in an event where Tina Brown was speaking about her new book.
Wow.
And, she was the editor of Vanity Fair and the New Yorker. And the interviewer was terrible. And it should have been me. It was a columnist from the Tribune, and it wasn't me. And I went to the ladies' room, and I overheard in the stalls all these people saying, I couldn't understand a word that interviewer was saying. And from my own stall, I said, I would have done a better job. And by the time
Of course you did.
Of course I did. By the time we were washing our hands, I dried my hands and handed her, one of these women, my card. And lo and behold, I'm going to be introducing and leading the interview for her book. And
wow.
So
What's her book? What's her book?
It's a memoir, and we are actually meeting Monday to start the plans for that. So I don't even have the name.
Well, if she has a women's health story, have her call me.
I will. But what I'm telling you is, I think that's a full range.
Yeah, that's outstanding. Those are outstanding examples.
But those are my women's room stories.
Yeah, the peeing blood story, that happened to me when I was home on break from college. I was probably 17 years old.
Yeah.
I was in the downstairs powder room in my parents' home, and I was terrified. And again, I didn't know what happened, and I didn't have a gynecologist at home. So I just went to the first person in the phone book was a woman who would see me. And my father took me. And this woman examined me. All she asked me was when my last period was, which had been about 8 weeks before. She didn't ask me if that was completely normal for me, which it was. And she came out she told me to go get dressed, have a seat in the waiting room. And she came out into the waiting room and told me in front of my father, who, let's just say, we'll call his temper an Irish temper.
Yeah.
She told me in front of my father that I was pregnant, which I knew I wasn't pregnant because I had not done anything that I could have made me pregnant. And my father didn't buy that. And he kept saying to me, where did you go to medical school? So I got out of that house as soon as possible, took the bus back to Princeton, and literally passed out. At the stop for Princeton. I just fainted on the bus. So they bring me to the infirmary, and lo and behold, when the doctor at the infirmary laughed when I told him this story. And he's like, no, you have a bladder infection.
Yeah.
Take this and you will feel better. And then when I told my father, he, of course, would never, ever apologize about anything. But what he said to me really influenced me. He said, this will teach you that a woman doctor can be just as bad as a man doctor.
It's so interesting because what your father said is exactly my response to that, which is it's the person who's the doctor,
Absolutely.
Not the doctor. So
Absolutely. And that guy, by the way, who I saw, he was the swim team doctor. He's now head of the infirmary at Princeton. He had left and come back. And so that was kind of fun when I reconnected and told him this story. All right. So my final question for you, which is my favorite question. What advice, and we'll keep it into it like health advice, would you give your 21-year-old self?
I knew this was coming. I have 5 answers, but it's such a simple piece of advice, but it sounds so silly, but to wake up and while you brush your teeth, just look in the mirror and accept yourself.
Oh, that's not silly. That's profound, and it's wonderful, and it's really good advice.
It's something it's a challenge I have every single day, partly to remember it and partly to do it. And it's astonishing how that helps create a groove in your brain. And it doesn't matter what you weigh, and it doesn't matter what your hair looks like, and it doesn't matter if you slept. It's really important, that self-acceptance and to like yourself. That's what I would say. I'm a big fan of napping. I wish I had embraced that earlier, playing outside, all sorts of things, but just being able to look in the mirror and say, yeah, I'm good. That's it.
That's awesome. And that's a great note to end on. Sally, I've already outed you on Twitter. People can find you at Hey Gal Sal. They can find you in the Chicago Tribune. They can send all their questions to me on Twitter at Dr. Donica, on my Facebook page at Dr. Donica. And I hope you and everybody else joins me for Facebook Live at 2 p.m. Eastern Time on Wednesday. And for every subsequent episode of In the Ladies' Room with Dr. Donica. Thanks again. This was wonderful. And I would love to have you back because we have 17 other topics that we need to talk about.
I'll join you in the ladies' room, literally or figuratively, anytime. I love you.
Love you too. Bye.
That's all we have time for today. But let's keep the conversation going on Twitter or Facebook at Dr. Donica. And please join us next week for another episode of In the Ladies' Room with Dr. Donica. Real conversations with real women about really intimate topics.